As weird as it sounds, but with at least 50% of the clients that create make.com scenarios in-house, I have seen the weirdest methods of dealing with time zones. Surprisingly enough, I've even seen other YouTubers in the automation space dealing with time zone in a way that makes no sense at all. They, for example, use AI to determine the time zone of a time string, which in my opinion is just the worst approach you can probably take. Not as it's really inaccurate and it often breaks things, but it is also coming along with additional costs for your make.com scenarios, which I just really don't understand. So today's video is my approach on showing you how you can actually convert time zones and manage them directly inside of make.com without occurring extra costs so that your workflows work better and are more accurate. Before we even dive into the scenarios, I would like you to know that make.com has its very own way of handling time zones. Oh, and to sprinkle in a little bit more of complexity, it's not only one, but it's two ways. The first one is your time zone defined on an organizational level, or basically your company level inside of make.com. This time zone is used for everything on a tech level and it is defined by you once you create your account. To give you a better example, let's assume you have a scenario that is scheduled to execute at 3 a.m. in the morning. Then make.com will use your time zone to determine what 3 a.m. actually means. So let's assume you're from the US and you want to schedule something at 3 a.m. in the morning. Then it would be 3 a.m. for you, but for the European clients, it would probably be somewhere around noon. The second way how make.com is altering the time zones is by defining it on a user level. So you as a user, when you log into make.com, you have the possibility of defining a time zone apart from the organization that is dependent on wherever you are. While this doesn't do much on a technical level, it helps you to understand the time zones that you're working in so that they can be adjusted visually by make.com so that you can represent them based on your time zone. Now imagine, for example, your client is in the US, they want to have a schedule at 3 a.m. in the morning, and you're sitting, let's say in Asia somewhere. You can have your time zone and it shows you basically the execution time of that US time zone, but in your time zone so that you can get a better understanding of when that schedule is actually happening based on your time zone so that it's easier for you to debug. Now, while make.com's efforts are great on one hand, they are bad on the other. Especially if you work with webhooks that don't properly format their date and time strings. You may think now, wow, that's great, Yannis, but why is it bad that make.com provides a time zone? Wouldn't it be worse if there wouldn't be any at all? That is certainly a valid point, but there will always be a time zone, nevertheless, of what make.com says. And that, my friends, brings us to the next part, the Coordinated Universal Time Zone, or in short, UTC. Mostly anything that happens on a technical level, let's say servers, let's say the backend structure of make.com, everything works with a universal time zone called UTC. So this allows us to basically streamline the time zone across a lot of technical aspects so we can always have it in one format that we can then use to branch it out to other formats or other time zones we need it in. And like I just shared, make.com is not different. It also handles the time zones directly inside of UTC, and I'm gonna prove it to you right here on my screen within a scenario that I just created. So it is a basic plain scenario like you would usually see it once you create it. And what I'm going to do now is I literally just select the tools and I select the set multiple variables section, and within it I just define a variable, and we're gonna call that one date time string. So now if I'm gonna click in the variable value, you probably also know that within here in this tabs of the dynamic tags, you will have one tab for the date and times. So you can basically pre-select a time, and you can also add variables like a timestamp, now, and you have a couple of functions. In my example, I'm just gonna use the now variable. So when I click OK and I'm gonna run the scenario, you'll see one specific thing. I'm gonna see here a timestamp, which is the current time of my time zone. Important to mention because that is the time zone that make.com uses from my user profile to display that information. So you can see it is June 22nd at 10:40 a.m., which is my time zone. But now there comes the part. As you can see already in the little pop-up, the time zone that is actually displayed as the time and date string looks different. So if you don't see it with a pop-up, or if you want to see it in a better way, you can also go to download output bundles, and once you open it, you can see the actual date and time string right here. And I'm just going to give you a quick explanation of it so you know what's going on. Obviously in the beginning we have the normal date formatted by the month, by the year, then the month, and then the days. There is another reason why it is formatted in that way, because you can hierarchically order it based on the date exactly. So let's say you have the 2024 is the highest number, then you have June, which is the highest number, then you have the day, which is the highest number after. So you can simply break it down, and you can just kind of create a hierarchy, which makes it easier with sorting algorithms to figure out a time. A very small detail, but that is why it is written in that format with the year first, then the month, and then the days, because you have it easier to sort things based on the current time to the older time, etc. Then we have a little t here, which just stands for time, which is kind of the separator that we use for separating the time from that actual date. As you can see here, we have the hours, we have the minutes, we have the seconds, and down here we have the milliseconds at the very end, separated by a dot and by having 3 characters of it. And at the end you see a weird Z, which is very important. That Z basically stands for Zulu, which is just another time zone in the UTC time zone itself. It is just something that we use to determine a very short and easy way on how the UTC time zone is defined. So that basically stands for Zulu, like I mentioned. So we know that this time string is in the UTC time format, which again is just what make.com internally uses as well to use the time zones, which in my opinion, and probably everyone else's opinion too, is that time zone that we should use when dealing with APIs and webhooks and anything else on a technological level. So basically everything that happens in make.com also runs on UTC. So why do they do this time zone conversion in the first place? The answer is to make it simpler for you so that you can deal with time zones in a visual way without worrying about converting things all the time back to UTC. Imagine you want to schedule a task inside of make.com for your scenario and you would need to always calculate back to, oh, what is actually the right UTC time I need to use to start this thing based on my time zone. Let's say I'm in the US and I would like to start it at 3 a.m. in the morning. How do I need to format this UTC time zone so that it works exactly at 3 a.m. in the morning in the US? So it is just a way of unifying that whole setup so that it's easier for you to handle and the error rate is less. Now, while this actually makes it easier when you use make.com on a daily basis, it sometimes becomes a bit of a trouble, especially if you work with UTC time zones. Like me, as a developer, I always work with UTC time zones. In that case, it becomes a little bit more complex. And that is not the only thing. There are other things like APIs as well that often do completely weird things, but I'm gonna get into this right now. If you've seen my previous videos about AI and webhooks, you probably know that most providers that create webhooks, so that might be the developers inside the company, whatever other external service provider they use for creating those API endpoints, they all have their very own interpretation of how a webhook or an API should look like. So there are massive differences sometimes on how they work. Even though we expect them based on the notations we have so far, they should be fairly similar, right? Unfortunately, it isn't that easy, and I often see things like time zones being returned in a separate field, and then the date and time string is in another field, but it has no time zone definition at the end, which means you, for example, not have a Z at the end that defines the Zulu time zone. In that case, if we only have a time, we don't know exactly which time zone it is in, right? So we would need to rely on that extra time zone parameter. Now, while this is great, it is actually very complex for make.com to reformat the time zone or convert it from one time zone that is not UTC to another time zone, because make.com offers you two functions. Maybe you've seen them. They're called parse date and format date. And to give you a basic explanation of those functions, parse date basically just translates a date string, so basically a date and a time in a string format, and it turns it into an actual date time format, so kind of like a timestamp, if you can imagine. This just generalizes the thing in one way, which is great, which is exactly what we want. So we can even define the format it should output it. The problem is it always, or very often, defines it in the time zone of the organization or the user. So you might get a different time zone outcome that you have expected when you actually get it. So to give you an example, let's for example say we have a date time string that comes at 10 a.m. in the morning in the US, but you are sitting, for example, in Europe and you're getting this time string and you want to parse it or you want to format it with those functions. Make.com most likely will format it depending on the organization's time string, which again can falsify that information if it was provided incorrectly by the API. Because of that, it is incredibly hard to actually get the correct time zone formatted into a time string that make.com can work with a time zone directly included into that date and time string. Now, luckily, you're watching this video because I'm going to provide you a solution for all of that, and it is completely for free. You don't need to create any accounts or whatsoever, and it directly works inside of make.com flawlessly, and we are really using that for a lot of our clients, especially for converting time zones with voice AI assistants, where people can, for example, say on the phone, hey, I would like to schedule a meeting tomorrow, and then you basically have AI just take that value and parse it through, send it to a function, and then we need to do some formatting there. In that case, it's again the exact same scenario. We have a time zone that we pass in a separate format or in a separate field, because sometimes with UTC time zone conversion by AI, it makes a lot of mistakes. We don't like that. So that is exactly why I try to rely as less as possible, and I literally just try to get the static or the most accurate and absolute values from the conversation that we have with the user in the voice AI assistant and send that back to the user. So we of course know where the user is from because of the lead list that we usually call, and we also have their time zone in most cases, so we can just pass that along in the request. Great. So now we have the date and time string and we have the time zone separately. So how can we format them? So the tool I'm talking about is called timezone.io, and it is basically a free service that allows you to map and validate and convert time zones in a visual way directly inside of make.com, so that you can rely on a service that actually does really, really good time zone formatting without relying on the fact that make.com translates time zone depending on yours, even though that is not even what you want for that specific use case. You might have run into that in the past, or you might have just ignored it and you just feed in wrong dates. I've seen that many times as well, that people just say, ah, whatever, the date doesn't matter that much to me if it's like an hour difference. Who really cares? They just push it in and that's it. But I value accuracy, and for us that is really, really important, especially if you want to run more scheduled tasks after. So that is exactly why I'm going to show you that, and it's going to be super powerful. So let's just jump right over to my screen. As you can see on my screen now, we are back inside of the make.com scenario, and I'm going to click on the variables field because we now set a time string. But what we're going to do instead is I'm just going to copy that part right from here. So as you can see, we basically just take the date time string, and I'm just going to feed that right within here. And as you can see now, we have basically no definition of the time zone itself. So in that case, what is it? We don't know. We cannot really say it for sure. It probably is UTC if it comes from an API, but I really mean probably, because often it is actually the user time zone as well. I've seen this with so many APIs. And in that case, what they usually have, they have another field, it's called time zone, and then they're gonna send over the time zone. So let's say our customers in the US, we can say, for example, America / and then Los_Angeles. There's a whole list for those time zones. I'm gonna show you them as well. They're also documented directly in the time API. So now if I'm gonna click OK here and I'm gonna run that, you can see that it basically just sends over this time string and it sends over the time zone. So these are often values that I've seen come in from webhooks, from API endpoints that can trigger a scenario in make.com. So now my goal is to basically generalize that and format that specific time of that time zone to UTC so that we can leverage it directly inside of make.com without needing to worry about the time zone being wrong or incorrect or whatsoever. To do that, what we are going to do is we click here on the little plus for adding a new module. We're going to select the HTTP module. You scroll down and you select the make a request action. Now we can define a URL and a couple of other parameters, and that is exactly where Time API comes in. So this is the page of Time API, as you can see here. It is completely for free. So all you do is you simply head over to the website, you copy their URL, timeapi.io. I'm gonna paste it here. Now I'm gonna head over to Get Started, which opens the Swagger documentation. So Swagger is basically just a generalized format of providing an API documentation for you in a visual way. You can basically just use it to get your API documentation in a JSON format whatsoever. It is just a standard for creating APIs in a visual way so that you understand them. That's all you need to know. The good thing is I'm telling you that because in a lot of documentations for different APIs, it always looks the same. So you can see this format. So if you get yourself familiar with this format, it definitely helps you a lot down the line. So if you know Swagger, you know that this is basically the endpoints that are provided, which are the endpoints that we can interact with on their API. And since we would like to convert a time zone in my case, we would use the conversion endpoint. But as you can see, they also have time endpoints, they have time zone endpoints. They allow you to do a lot of different formattings, but we really just care about the time zone conversion. And I haven't mentioned it yet, but you don't need to know any coding, but you definitely need to know what JSON is, or you should basically be able to understand JSON, because JSON is the structured format that we use for communicating with the API. So if that sounds complicated, don't be afraid. What we're gonna do now is we basically just copy this URL here. Since I cannot really copy it, I'm just gonna copy that part, and I can see there's an /API in the front. So what we would do is at the end of this URL, we would paste API, and then I'll just add this whole time zone conversion string right here, which is this one. As a method, we have get here. This one requires a post method. So what we're gonna do is we change the method to post. Gonna head back over to Time API, and now you can see that it basically just sends over a JSON as a payload. Head basically over to another tool called JSON Editor Online. It is also for free. I'm gonna paste this whole string right here. And you can see now a couple of values. I'm just pasting it here so I can show it to you visually and I can make it a little bit easier to understand. So we have the from time zone, which is obviously clear. This is the time zone where the actual time that comes in is from. So in our case, this would be actually like here, America, Los Angeles. So we would literally just put that part here. Then we would have the actual date and time, which is the one that comes from the API, right? And we would have the to time zone. And the to time zone is very important because that is the one we would like to format it in. So we would set this one to simply UTC. You can even set it to other time zones in the UTC time zone because there are quite a few in the time zone. So you can define Zulu, you can define UTC. In my opinion, I just use UTC because it's the easiest and you don't need to remember much. Then we also have DST ambiguity, which is something that you probably don't need to worry too much. It's more interesting if it comes to time zone conversion of winter, summertime. So for countries that, for example, switch the time zone, right? If you want to support that or not. So in my case, I'm just going to leave it empty and I'm going to copy this whole JSON. What I'm going to do now is head into the make.com scenario. Within here in the body type, I select draw. Then I select the content type JSON. And in the request content, I'm just going to post this part right here. So now, since we have the values available from our incoming webhook, which are the ones that we would like to format to the UTC time zone, what I would do is I would obviously remove the time zone here and I would select the time zone dynamically from the dropdown. And I'm going to do the same thing for the datetime right here. So let's just select this datetime string. And we're gonna set also parse response to yes, so we can actually see the response. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just running this whole thing. So now if we click here on the little bubble, you can see that, oh, it says a 400 error, which means something went wrong. We can also see that it says invalid date time format, which means the time and date that we actually inputted here is not in a correct format. So right now you can see it's in a visual format. And obviously I think for most APIs, it will never arrive this way. But to show you that we can still make this work, I'm gonna show you an example at the end of this video on how we can use this datetime string to actually format it so that it works as well. But now for simplicity reasons, what I'm going to do is I'll simply use the predefined time that is defined here in the API, so we can actually just test it alongside with this one. So I'm just gonna click in here, I'm gonna add another variable, we're gonna call it date time string wrong. This is where I'm gonna paste this part up here, and here I'm gonna paste this part. So I'm just gonna change it to the current year, just to make it a little more accurate. Now I'm gonna press OK, and I'm going to run this whole thing again. So now if we did everything right, we get a status code 200 back, which means now it actually recognized the data format, which is this format that we just have available here, or the MySQL format. And inside the data format, it becomes really interesting now. So look at this. We have the from time zone, from date, and the to time zone, which is the values that we defined. And then we have the conversion results, which are very interesting. So you can see the exact separate values broken down into separate fields, so you can always access them separately. You can as well see the date time, which is the exact conversion of the date time that we have. And as you can see here, we have as well the T, but the Z is missing at the end, right? So what we could do now is, before I'm going into that actually, I just wanted to show you the other values as well. So DST active is false, which is okay. Time zone is UTC, this is exactly what we wanted. And now, if you want to turn this into a UTC timestamp, what we can do is we literally just add the Z at the very end inside of our next field. So let's, for example, say we're going to have another one for setting a variable. Let's say new timestamp, and then we can say in here, okay, we have the conversion results. I'm going to set this date time, and at the end I'm adding a Z because we have UTC, which is Zulu. So now if I'm going to run this whole thing again, you can see directly in here, we have a properly formatted timestamp. And this one will also work directly inside of make.com. Obviously, I see you have we have one more thing that we could do here. We have 00. Okay, we have basically the standard definition. So we have no milliseconds, as you can see in this response right here. We have basically the hours, the minutes, and the seconds. So in order to also properly mention the milliseconds, what we can do is we simply go right back into here. I add a point before the Z, and then I just add 000, which would be the definition for milliseconds, because we don't have it in that case. So now if I'm going to run this whole thing, you can see directly within here, we have now basically a properly formatted time string, and you can see that it automatically formats it based on make.com's validation. But if you're looking into the output bundles, you can see that we have the properly formatted time string, and now we have it in UTC, depending on the customer time zone, so that we can reuse it inside of our scenario wherever we need it. Now, like I mentioned, we have the other part that I just defined here, which is the time string that is wrong. So we could basically reformat that time string directly inside of make.com as well. In that case, what I'm going to do is I'll simply add another module. We're going to add another tools module, and I'm going to set multiple variables. So now we say the wrong format corrected. So it's just another variable I'm defining for you. And right within here, our goal is to basically just take this wrong date time string and format it into a different format so that it is available in a proper timestamp that we can then reuse again inside of make.com. So to do that, what I will do is I will head over to the date and time functions. I'm going to set the parse date right here. Now within the parse date, in the first part, so in the date part, I'm going to add this wrong date time string. And here we can now define the exact format of that we have added it. So you can see the time string says here June. So June. So if we look now in the make.com documentation, you can see here in format, we have tokens for date time formatting. So we can simply open that one, and you will now see a massive list of things that we can use for formatting the date time. You can see here January, February, November, December. So what have we defined here? We have actually defined June, which is the fully written month. So in that case, this would be the right word. So I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna paste that directly inside here, because June is the first value that we basically use. Then I'm gonna add a space, and now we have 22, which are the days. And the days were defined as DD, as you can see here, because it's the 2-digit definition. So then we basically just add here DD. And then you can see it's a comma separation, then it's a space, as you can see here, and then it's the year. So for the year, just gonna paste YYYY, because I know this is the one for the actual year, as you can see here too. And now at the end we have another space, and then we have the standard definition of the time that we also use in make.com. So we have here the 2-digit definition with HH, which is for the hours. So we're gonna paste HH. We can also see maybe within here, actually, we can even just get that from here. So HH double point MM, which is the exact same definition like here. And I guess that is actually the definition. Let me just check exactly the value that we're sending through. Oh, it says AM as well at the end. So then we basically need to add this as well. So I click again at the very end. I'm gonna add another space. Now we can check for the date and time format of AM, which is here, which is a big A. So we're gonna add the big A here. Just gonna click OK. I'm not gonna add an extra time zone. I'm just gonna run this whole thing. And yeah, so now if we look at it, we can see that, yep, I have the wrong time string right here. So what I'm gonna do is I remove this one because it was the original one, but we want the actual wrong one because that's the one we formatted for. I'm gonna click OK. Now we're gonna run the scenario again. And now again, if we look into here, we can see June 22nd, 2024, 10 a.m. So it looks the exact same, right? But if we're gonna look into the output bundle, you can see that the actual time format was formatted to a Zulu time, which means now it is actually the internal time that we were expecting. The only difference is we can see 6:40, and this is exactly what I mean with make.com doing all the formatting for you. It formats it again depending on your current time zone. So we don't want that. What we want is we want to use the UTC time zone. So what I'm gonna do is I'll add another semicolon. I'm gonna say UTC. So I'm gonna press this whole scenario or run it again. And now we can see it says 2:40 p.m. here, probably my time, and you can see 10:40 is the Zulu time, so the UTC timestamp, which would then again match with that actual time zone that we are defining. So just to show you that whole thing again, 10:40 is now the Zulu time, which if we would define it here, would be basically the UTC time, right? Again, it doesn't fully make sense because now we have the UTC time. So what we would do is we would basically still kind of use the formatter. I would just probably strip away the Z at the end of the tag right within here. And I would then send it again to the time API and then format it over again. And then you can basically again get the proper time conversion. So just one more thing so that you actually see that or how I would do it. I would basically just click on add item. I would define the new value here, just gonna call that one. And now we could basically do the same thing we did here. Now just with one more thing. And this is right here in the text and binary functions. You can find a field here called replace. I'm just gonna put in whatever we had here. Then I'm searching for the Z and I'm gonna replace it by an empty string. So if I run this thing again, you can see now, we can see an arrow actually. Okay, so it probably is because it considers it a time format. So in that case, we would probably even need to format it to a text string. So in that case, I would probably just copy that part again. Gonna head back into here. It's good actually that we can test it now, so you can get a feeling on what you need to do. Over here, we have another function. It is called toString. I'm gonna paste this whole thing in here. Gonna click OK, and I'm gonna run this whole thing again. So now if we look into it, you can see that we basically have now formatted that actual timestamp, but we have removed the Z at the end. And now we could, for example, use this thing again in the same format, and we can feed it directly into the time API, and then time API does the formatting for us. So again, what I just showed you now is a little more complex, and honestly, I would have probably never even expected this kind of format from an API, but I just wanted to show you that even with the wrong time format here, you can still parse information and you can format it in a timestamp and then use the initial time zone that came along with it to format the time again based on the time API definition or API. So that's a lot of information to digest. I suggest to just check this video over and over. If you have any further questions, you're most welcome to drop them down below in the comments. And that's all I got for you. I hope you got some value out of this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.